Okay, so welcome everyone to Earthwalk Ways. Slowly, I hope to, be kind of grounding a little more fully into this channel and including, better information in the, drop down and helping people, find more. Um, but here we are. It's a new spring. Little seeds are being planted. Hopefully, they'll bear good fruit. And let's sort of just tune in and welcome spring coming in together. I don't know if you're, locked into an office or whatever. So if you are even in your heart, you can go and sort of send good vibes to the new spring. But if you get a chance, please, take a minute and be outside in the sun with the new green shoots coming up or some flowers or something. Um, yeah, I actually have a poem song that's on my SoundCloud channel that I'll also try to put in the link for spring. And I think I'll not sing it here, but it's a nice poem, so let me read it. It says, "Waters from the mountains flow, melting from the winter snows. Force of new life breaks through stone." I love that image, like that the force of new life is strong enough, life can break through stone. And we need to have faith in that power of nature. And then the second verse goes, "Bird song rings to herald spring, flowers in the sun dancing. Eagle brings a vision from the heights, fierce dedication to the beauty of life. Viva," it's like I give life, viva to the newborn spring. Viva to all newborn beings. We give you thanks and our blessings. It is for you that we sing. So welcoming in all of the brand new life that's first incarnating, peeking its head out from the underground, stretching out from its, underground forms in seed or in, pupa form or something like that for insects, and just an amazing time of emergence, right? Which is also something that we understand now in biology and in evolution is, just an aspect of nature. So last time we talked about learning to become really present in nature and shift from doing mode to being mode, allowing doing to arise from being while staying connected to the sensory flows of nature all around us. And so many of these sensory flows are, registered through our usual channels: touch, taste, smell, hearing, vision. But there is another less well known but hugely important sensory organ that is the key to experiencing longing, the mystical belonging and union that is what can help us let go of the defenses and relax into life again. This experience of mystical belonging and union is, not a permanent state for me. But the glimpses I have had of it, mostly when I'm sort of deeply immersed in the atmosphere of the forest, but also other times of release or clarity, sort of the ha-ha moments that seem to renew the world again. Then I feel the movement of spirit in my life. And I also feel the love that is present. It's not something that when I'm just in my mind I tune into, I'm aware of because the mind can't connect to it. But when we're, in this other state of sensory connection, we can actually feel the love that is at the foundation of everything. The union, the connectedness, the compassion, the tenderness, I believe it is permeating our universe. So this, felt sense of kind of belongingness, of connectedness is very healing, even though we can't, live in it continuously. Even the brief moments of it, I think, help us remember the truth of who we really are, and what we are connected with, right? What's home, where we are. So this truth is not an idea, it's not a mental understanding, although, it can also, be explained or, talked about in that way, but it really is a direct apprehension, right? And so it's a experience, I think, more as a knowing or intuition. It could be talked about as a felt sense, and then how are you feeling it? Because everybody, I think, senses in different ways. Um, but I think the channels that we're, able to, listen through are all in some way connected to the organ of the body that is a sensory organ that gives us this experience, this feeling, this felt sense, this, direct, immediate, like awareness of something here now, and so there is another organ that we're not often aware of, or people don't realize is exactly the sensory organ that it is. And so it turns out beyond our mechanical sensations, which are like touch and sound, or the chemical ones like taste, a great number of senses that, are like more vast than we know are tuned into the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, our eyes are picking up the visual part of the spectrum. That's why we call it the visual part of the spectrum, right? Is that we can see it with our eyes. But it's just a tiny fragment of the entire electromagnetic spectrum. And, it's interesting that we would think that, that our organism would not somehow be conscious or somehow sensorily attuned to more of these energies than it is. And I think that the truth is we are, when we're, in some ways, the world is continually speaking to us electromagnetically. And then we're also sort of receiving and sharing our own magnetic state with the world. We're radiating our own broadcast into the field and sharing our electromagnetic state that is being also, connected to and receiving from and interchanging with other electromagnetic states around us. So anyway, there's this kind of really interesting thing that, we have, all this electromagnetic energy coming in and leaving. There must be like eyes or ears or nose, we must have an organ of perception. And what we've discovered is that while there are many electromagnetic, uh, areas of the body, aspects of the body that create electromagnetic fields, measurements show that by far the very largest electromagnetic field that we generate is not in the brain, but in the heart. It's through the heart. It's through, and the heart is way, way more than a pump. And, it's like we are just beginning to understand, this organ. It's quite amazing. And, I recommend a book. It's an older book, and there may be some new things on it. But it's by Stephen Harrod Booner, and it's called The Secret Teachings of Plants, and then it's subtitled the intelligence of the heart in the direct perception of nature. And it's ways back, but he has the latest understanding and research about this. And so there's probably more. I'm being inspired to go look online and see what else there is and do some more research about this now, because it's very, very important, and we're just not so conscious of it. So for our purposes, let's consider this heart as a perceiver, as a sensory organ. It's also a sender, a broadcaster. But, it's kind of like, I guess, with electromagnetics, kind of like the information and everything is like it's variability and stuff is through, interference patterns and, all of that. So I think it can be sort of this both sending and receiving at the same time, that there's an interfacing that is going on through all of that, that is at some deep level in our unconscious information coming into us. Now, we may not register it consciously, but more than we know, I think we are, tuned in. And so for what I want to do is, for our purposes here today, we're going to consider this perceiver of the heart, the sensory organ of the heart, as something that is tuned into what I would call the spirit of the moment, right? So, so somehow the heart is in this present moment, and it is, even if our mind is wandering around or whatever, it's attuning and registering, in this moment, all of the different electromagnetic fields that it's encountering, from outside of itself in the world, um, and then, that's uh, informing it, as well as shaping it. And, so we all know, like when we're in the forest, I mean, one of the things I like to do, even more when the leaves are down, before the new leaves come out in the spring, the vast trunks of the trees that go up into the sky. And you can do this when the leaves are out as well, but it seems, more dramatic. Like looking up, at the top of the trees, it makes a shift energetically in, where we are now connecting more to the lift of the breeze, of the air, of the, spaciousness and the vastness of sky. And the minute that we, kind of become aware and lift our attention up into that, I feel it in my body, right? It uplifts my heart. So things like that are endless to explore when you're in the forest. And to begin to pay attention to the heart, and the breath is also a good way to, connect to the heart in the moment now, and just explore. So, each moment, has a kind of atmosphere or mood, or a significance or energy or feeling to it. And I think the heart is this organ that resonates and responds to that spirit of the moment and the information that is contained in that. So we do not pay much conscious attention to this spirit of the moment, but like I said, we're always tuned in unconsciously. And it is the mysterious cause of much that we don't understand in our own shifting moods, our own, dynamics and interactions with each other. I think there's a lot more electromagnetic communication going on that, is interpreted through maybe, uh, incorrect understanding, but, it is always being read. And so the more we can understand this is going on, I think the better um, that we can help ourselves. We need to understand our own moods and, how we can work with them. So in a way, the forest feels like, there's this balm or of peace and harmony in nature that we can tap into if we're conscious of the intelligence of the heart, and if we're, aware that there's this, information coming into us. So I haven't really kept up with this field recently, like I said, but I want to, remind you again of this book called The Secret Teaching of Plants, The Intelligence of the Heart and the Direct Perception of Nature. It was written by Stephen Harrod Boehner. I believe he's passed away now. Um, but, he had a lot of good information in there that really inspired me to explore it directly. And in his book, in a way, is a invitation also to explore it directly. So um, it takes time for us to be able to do this, to have this connection, to open this perceiving organ and become aware of it for several reasons. And it's partly that it's just not our habit. I think people that, naturally lived closer to nature than we do, like receive the benefit of that harmony and that peace and calm, in ways that, our bodies have grown up and developed in mechanical and stressful kinds of environments. And so my sense was, in my own experience especially, that it takes time to decompress, that we really don't realize how wrapped up and tightly held we are in our nervous system, in our bodies. It's unconscious largely. It's kind of like just the water that we swim in. So we're not as aware of it until it intensifies even more, and then or burns us out, or we have a breakdown or something like that. So the, it's it's something that it's just almost to us normal. And so nature is really a useful thing to kind of help us find our way back to really a deeper calm and relaxation and being state. The calm of a natural setting can really help us. I remember on my very first vision quest, I'd been working for 10 years in the DC Department of Corrections as a case manager. Had about 100 inmates on my caseload. And, you know, this environment, as most immune environments, is stressful. I mean, what I liked about it was that people weren't trying to be, totally professional. It was like sort of over the top. And so there was a little more freedom, for people to vent a little, release their stress, within bounds and that kind of thing. And sometimes it got out of bounds, or, sometimes it got dark, and people were, I don't know, in power games and things like that, both inside and outside. But, what was for me, not something that I was so tied up in, but just, the stress of the energy and that environment, of the, kind of trying to deal with, getting things done. And so when I first found this land, which was like after I had resigned from the department, and it was, partly in search of sort of finding a place to put out my shingle and do this new work that I'd been training in. Um, the first thing I did when I came here, I did a 4-day solo, and almost immediately, you know, I set up this camp alongside the stream, and it was not really a traditional vision quest. I had so much tension and energy, kind of stored in my body that it was not for me to just sit in one place, settle down, and just be. I couldn't even get there. So I just let myself roam. For 3 days, I and my pack of three canine friends that were with me, we just walked and roamed, and we explored sort of every inch of the public lands along my retreat borders. And I could feel just in the walking, like the tension that was driving it, and yet it just felt like that was the right thing to do intuitively. And so I just kept letting myself, I didn't try to control it. I didn't try to sit still. I didn't try to relax intentionally. I just allowed that energy to move in the way that it wanted to move. And after the 3 days, I felt like finally, things were coming down, settling down. So here at Earthwalk, we're not really in some wilderness or in some great isolated nature space, but the lands I border follow a stream down to the river. And, there are some invasives and that kind of thing, but there's still many beautiful natural micro ecosystems and rocky terrain, and walking down the canyon where the run hits the fall line, and there's just, the water. Sometimes it trickles, but sometimes it swirls, and there's falls, and you can rock hop and meander down to the river. You can wade in the water or just sit beside dappled pools. So it's really a wonderful space to connect and just be immersed in a natural setting. Um, but even with this amazing invitation of nature, like come sit or like connect here. It took 3 whole days of moving, of just following this tension as it unwound itself, as it moved through my body, and exploring also sort of whatever would come up in the process. And I wasn't like trying to control much of it. Was curious about it, was paying attention, was watching to some degree. So, but what confirmed my intuition was, like over the third day, I could feel everything starting to relax and to ground, and it felt like finally I had arrived here from wherever I was. And I mean, I was, finally able to just notice and be aware of, feel the beauty and the presence of the forest all around me. I knew it was there when I first found the place and when I bought the place. And I mean, it was, something that but I, was sort of too bound up to receive it directly. So in some ways, it was this quest for this connection with this land that was my first thing. And this is what it amounted to, was this, you know, releasing of all of that tension in my being so that I could arrive here and be open enough to connect with the presence and the beauty that was around me. And so that, in many ways, is like what I think most of our vision quests here could be about, right? Because most of us are, disconnected from all of that, and in a way, there may be other things also that come up and surface, but to me, that's the one beautiful and powerful thing that also it offers. And for me, by arriving, sort of, I began to feel my heart open as my mind was also beginning to still, and my awareness then was just naturally drawn, to something, like sort of whatever natural attraction was calling my attention, whether it was a light and shadow contrast on the bark or the leaves of a tree, or maybe it was the movement of the leaves in the wind, or maybe it was, drawn to a particular fork in the branch, in the texture of the bark. I mean, there's just so much richness everywhere. And, that's the visual. And then, of course, all around, the sound of the rustling of the breeze in the leaves and the bird song. This to me is an incredible richness. And, we don't realize really that's the true richness, beyond money and, the power or the baubles that can buy. if we don't have a connection to this, all of that, uh, we reach out to fill the empty spaces inside, and they may temporarily do that. But it really takes this kind of natural richness that deeply fills the empty spaces inside of us. And it's not a mental exercise, it's an experiential awareness that we immediately feel the difference between the fullness and the connectedness that is offered there versus sort of the hollowness and the sugar highs of the rest of life. So this is really what the heart as a sensory organ allows us to tune into. And this is what can replace all our addictions and also, soothe and, lovingly, untangle and relax all our kind of mangled and tender sensitivity. Like sensitivity almost is a dirty word in our culture, um, and that's really tragic because sensitivity is life, and the more that we numb, the longer that the more we lose life. Right? So we need to reframe our understanding of sensitivity. So the heart ideally is sensitive, and sometimes it's been broken many times, and sometimes we've numbed it or we've defended, kind of put a armor around it, like so it doesn't feel so painfully sensitive to us. And so we can, pretend we're tough so people don't hurt us when we're sensitive. But, somehow, just blocking more hearts doesn't seem to really be the answer. And the personal reality of that is that we're going to feel empty. And then we're going to need constant distraction. And, we feel bad and we want to feel good. And, so, that means we tend to want to avoid, the difficulties of sensitivity, because sensitivity, feels pain, but it's also the sensitivity that feels the joy, feels the pleasure, feels the goodness, and feels the beauty, the loveliness, the wonderfulness of everything. So if we don't have that connection, then it's kind of a dark and blurry, bleak world. So when we numb ourselves, we get stuck, and then in order to find ourselves and feel at home here, we have to re-embrace our sensitivity. And we have to learn how to differentiate. Some of the confusion comes because we don't know exactly how to differentiate the natural feelings from the wounded, reactive, traumatized feelings and the defense feelings that we have. So there's the simple hurt of a situation, and then there's all of our, defenses. Um, so we can find our way back into the world that we're meant to inhabit, one that is embedded in nature and knows what nature knows. And that's kind of where we can, reconnect and find a kind of grounded way of being sensitive that, will help us have resilience and, joyfulness, playfulness, spontaneity, all kinds of good stuff. And of course, this takes us, this comes from the heart, takes us back to the heart. And when we are open and relaxed and in a state of being, that is simply present, attending to the immediate sensory flows of the moment, And these can be multiple currents. It's usually not just one thing, but a whole tapestry of information that on one level has some kind of gestalt, but then there's also maybe something that you're more attuned to, or you're needing to attend to, because there's just multidimensional information in these flows, and there's different aspects that we can tune into depending on the purpose. So, to me, the best and most open purpose is simply to notice what we notice. So, instead of trying to figure out what we're supposed to be paying attention to, just notice what does kind of call your attention. What are you paying attention to? And that can be interesting too, because what calls to us can actually be from the mystery, or be a kind of guidance, or be a kind of natural affinity or something. So when we listen, we discover something helpful, full of wisdom and understanding. We turn our attention in that direction, and oftentimes it seems, sort of synchronicity or a divine perfection, or a really interesting revelation that sort of fits something that is about an inner question that we're sitting with, that is answered by some observation or some call from nature that we attend to. So again, for the science behind this, check out the Berner book on the secret teaching of plants. um, Stephen Herod Berner, he does a deep dive into this information encoded in energy, nature's energy flows, and how we read them and be in harmony with this greater intelligence around us. And like I said, this is a book that's been out a while, so I'm expecting really that research will bring a lot more newer information as well, because this is a cutting edge of our understanding right now. The Heart Math Institute also deals with this, and there's all kinds of things with the heart coherence kinds of understanding, and it's connected, I believe. But yeah, and so there's much more to learn in all of this. But this is nature's call. This is nature's invitation, and this is, I think, the way that nature can best heal us. Although, of course, all the herbs and all of the, it has so many ways of healing us. It's just astounding, right? Um, but this mystical experience, this way of kind of entering in and feeling um, like you're among friends, even though you're alone in the forest. Like there's I don't know if this could be a bridge. I'm aware that there's a lot of people feeling very isolated these days, and I know there was a time when I would go down to the creek alone, and it was a longing, really to go down there and share it with somebody. And that's partly why I have a retreat. It's like, come and share with me, because to me there's nothing more rich than being with somebody and enjoying all of that. But you can't really be with each other and be talking about things, or just focusing on each other. um, you have to kind of learn how to be together, but in silence for most of it, where you can also be with all of what nature is present. And so, there's a, a beautiful thing that happens when we can share those experiences in nature. But for a long time, and I think for many people right now as well, there's a lot of isolation, a lot of aloneness, and there aren't other people so much available to share things with. And I know during my kind of, it seemed like about a 10-year period where I was kind of almost cloistered, right? And working with all of these feelings where, I wanted to connect with my land, but somehow I it was too lonely to do it by myself. And so it was hard to go out onto the land by myself when I still had this longing so much to share it with somebody else. And so, but gradually, that changed as I became aware that the land also, was connected and, needed me, that there was a way that the land could be understood as conscious companionship, that it wasn't just unconscious, material out there, that everywhere I looked and everything was interacting with me, was, you know, maybe doing its own thing, a bird call, but, somehow it touched me in a certain way and stimulated something in me. And, you know, I believe that there was a larger intention, maybe by the universe, by nature herself, right, to speak through that bird to my own heart in that moment. So, it is personal. It's like part of what we're missing in the nature connection is we don't realize, we think it's impersonal. And so I think as a child, that's what I felt instinctually. And then I lost that. And I've been, I spent a lot of my lifetime trying to find that again. And, you know, I think I have that the, return to the understanding of the real relationship that we can have with nature is really powerful and rich, and maybe something, that can help us, uh, accept ourselves, learn to individuate more, bring our own unique flower forth, whatever, but then find also the way to be with peers, with each other, to uh, with people that are different. There's some way in which my hope is that, we can bridge between this deeper feeling of belonging in the natural world, ultimately into a deeper feeling of belonging in our human world. Um, and we need that. But it's like, I think we have to kind of go back to the beginning, back to the place where we can, I guess, almost in a way receive this original mother, like, and connect again with that source and beauty. And, to feel how we naturally, evolving out of this, find that, our bodies, our beings, generally, I mean, most of us, I believe, like, naturally resonate, naturally relax, naturally, receive a good sensation from the, heartbeat of the earth. And so I don't know. I just recently ran across something that was doing some kind of a tactile, vibration thing that was supposed to be also really helpful to help us relax. And so I might explore that because, like I said, we have no idea how uh, sort of uptight and tense we are. And that's what also keeps us in a state of separation. And so, you know, what that means is when you go on vacation, if you go to a natural area, um, really see if you can stay there and stay there for some time. Uh, there's always things that call us and interesting things to go and do and see, but you might explore a different kind of, the word staycation, is appropriate here, even though it's, you know, you could go someplace, but stay there when you get there and give yourself enough time to let yourself sink down, to relax into the ground, to, slow down, um, and uh, be more receptive in general. And that will give you, a better reset, as a vacation ideally should. And it also, I think, will just it's a practice that we're learning to do. We're uptight sort of continuously when we really don't need to be. It's just a habit. It's automatic. We don't know how to turn it off because we don't even know we're doing it. So by becoming more aware of our tension and our stress, we can, like practice relaxing with various things, all natural. Our breath, and is a good one. Um, I learned a good, deepening breath exercise where you just inhale. They were using a count of 5, but they were also extending it. So I don't know if the count is that important, but you inhale and pause. And inhale as fully as you can and pause at the top, and then exhale as fully as you can and pause at the bottom. And then on the next inhale, see if you can take in a little bit more. And, do it slower, or, explore the tempo that feels right. But, that also, helps, all of this is around the nervous system, the vagus nerve, the whole process. So we're very, very, very yang, very sympathetic nervous system based in our culture. And this is part of what drives a lot of our disharmony and our suffering, both medically, physically, health wise, as well as psychologically and emotionally. So good. So I wrote a little statement that's on the back of my brochure for Earthwalk Ways called The Invitation. This was years ago, but I think it captures this experience of being in relationship with nature. So it's called The Invitation. It says, Mother Nature is overflowing with light, love, and life. She is a loving sea of radiance, of light and beauty. We are a supreme sensitivity. Can you feel her call? Along with all the angels, every rock and tree, every field and stream, every sunrise and star is shining with all its being, shining to attract our attention, to enlighten our hearts, to mirror our own radiance, to pull us out of self-absorbed separation. Come partake of sun and moon and stars, of forest, field, and river. Come learn to eat beauty as an act of communion, to receive Mother Nature as sacrament. When we partake of her divinity, our hearts open, and we naturally align with that same radiance in us. Our higher self responds to and is awakened by the beauty of creation. As human beings, we are mediums, deep resonance chambers for the powers of the cosmos. Again, supreme sensitivity. Our ecstasy comes from being filled with these energies. Once we transform the numbness, the terror, the guilt, and the grief that keeps us in separation, we can awaken to discover who and where we really are. And we can come home to our planet and ourselves. And so that's the vision, the hope, the promise. And so I hope everyone is celebrating this newly arriving spring. Equinox is coming, and when I was born, it actually occurred on my birthday, March 21st, 1951. So I always feel like I'm, born with each new spring every year. And I'm turning 75 years, hopefully wiser, coming Saturday then. And The rest of the world also is kind of in this focusing on those first degrees of Aries with some of the major collective planets, like in this 0 degree Aries range, and having just recently come through into this new cycle, because Aries is the beginning of the new cycle. And so, a beginning of the beginning, let's hope, even though we're still, aware that things are kind of coming down around us. Let's celebrate in nature, the fragility and the resilience and the strength and the power of, this new life coming in, and see if we can mostly arrive back to the state of humility in the presence of the great mystery that nature is, and to let go of the mechanical understanding of things and the you know misunderstanding that we can sort of somehow reverse engineer it. You know, the good life is invoked with deep listening into this greater mystery. And, it's great to, try to understand how all the pieces fit together and how they work. But ultimately, the whole is way beyond the sum of its parts. And if we can remember and keep sight of that as well, remember to, sort of drop down into the stillness of the field, maybe even below the quantum field. I'm not sure where it is, but, there's these many levels of this mystery. And so we're learning a new way of listening to what is beyond us, what is within us, and to try to understand, how it can help us move into the next sort of state of being, I think, that we're trying to manifest. Okay, so this uh, time we're not as didn't run the whole hour. Um, and I can share a little bit. I just was recently talking to a old friend of mine, Mary Janet Fowler. She's also an author and a great Gaian devotee of nature, and her mission truly is in sort of reminding us to be more conscious and sort of less human centered and more fully nature centric. But she's in Ireland now, and we had an interesting conversation. And I thought, oh, we should just have these conversations online with everybody. I think you might enjoy them. So hopefully in a couple of weeks we'll have a guest and have a little you know two voices in the conversation instead of just mine. So um, and feel free to connect with me if you also would like to join in that conversation. I am, always interested in, having the synergy of, others' experiences and, you know, ways of penetrating into all of this. So, okay, everybody, thanks so much for joining us. Um, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.